All right, so this video is going to expand on some of the concepts I shared earlier in a video I did on certain aspects of Tai Chi and its internal mechanics. In this video, I'm going to talk about basically the free flow of gravitational forces through our body and how that relates to certain aspects of the beginning of standing practice. And first, we need to understand that we normally don't really feel or have much of a tangible understanding for how gravity is interacting with the tissues and structures in our body, because obviously that's kind of a weird and kind of an unnatural concept. All people typically really feel in their body is like, my hands are maybe here, my legs are maybe here, and maybe my back or my neck is tight or something hurts. But then eventually that stuff kind of numbs out through just kind of habituation. And then maybe we don't even know we have pain until someone comes along and presses on it, or we just normalize to it and then eventually develop some kind of injury as we get older, things of that nature. Obviously people that are into dance or sports or different things where you really use your body will probably have a bit more awareness of their body within space and maybe develop some awareness of where their center of gravity is, of course. But in general, most people have no concept of this, especially within the level that you can get to from the process of standing. And this is why standing is typically the foundational aspect of really any legitimate internal training system, is because a lot of these basic concepts and how it can be used to build the ability for the mind and the body to interact in deeper and deeper and more meaningful and more impactful ways. And also just really open up the body and start to open the channels, so to speak, to a pretty basic degree. So basically the process of standing as it relates to the concept of gravity and basically that mental tension is largely blocking the free flow of that. So it usually starts off where you stand and you don't feel anything, other than like, oh, my legs hurt, or like, my neck kind of hurts. Like certain basic things hurt just because your body really maybe isn't used to that, or like, oh, my low back hurts. Like, for example, I remember when I had jobs that I used to have to stand, 8 hours a day, I'd be like, oh, my sacrum, my low back is killing me. But it's just because it was compressed. So the gravity over time was flowing through and getting jammed up in that area. So it caused compression, which caused pain, which just is something that I had for many years and took me a few years of standing to actually get that to unwind, let go, decompress, basically. So large in part, a lot of the pain and a lot of the issues that people feel really comes down to this compression, and the body isn't really able to have the springiness, because when we're young, we're springy. Everything, our tissues are hydrated, and our body can adapt very easily. It can bounce back very quickly from things. Whereas as we get older, we get more dry, more rigid, more inflexible. And this is largely because of our mental patterning and basically just the normal process of developing an identity and existing in the modern world, where you more or less function from fight or flight the vast majority of the time, unless you have, really a rare exception to that rule. But basically, so first we kind of feel nothing, or we feel like, oh, this is tight, this hurts, like basic muscular things. But then what starts to develop over time is that the more of the kind of bigger muscular tensions that can let go is the more that we can actually start to feel where gravity is getting stuck as it goes through our body, which is usually why it's a top-down process, which usually for a lot of people starts very incrementally and then eventually becomes like a whole thing where your whole body is just one thing. It's not really like separate, all these things. It's just one object, and it's just kind of like, oh, it's basically this spongy suit thing in which bones are kind of floating. Whereas that's the opposite experience that most people feel and think that is how the world operates, meaning people think normally your skeleton holds you up and it's fighting against gravity, when in reality, that's not quite healthy, and that's actually not sustainable. And that's usually why people's joints wear out and why they develop problems over time. So basically, standing in this way is a way to actually develop the ability to feel the quality of mind in a real, tangible, in a kind of objective way. Objective in the sense that over time it will produce real and verifiable results that someone else can see, someone else can look at. Your literal body will change, and then that will reflect different qualities in your mind. So your outlook will naturally change, your personality, your reaction to things will naturally change. Because I don't think people quite realize, I mean, for obvious reasons, because you've never done this process, just literally how much time and not time, but I mean, yeah, but not really relevant. How much energy people invest in basically fighting against themselves, fighting against the world, fighting against what they're feeling, and just basically existing in a state of contraction and conflict. And this, some people might be like, well, no, I'm really flexible. But the thing is that oftentimes can be the exact opposite, because I've met plenty of really flexible people that are also still really tight and bound up in this way. It's just their joints are hypermobile and their system just kind of like de-slacked. So then they kind of went to the other extreme. And basically, it's an easy way to look at it where if you're trying, like if you have a drum skin, which is a common metaphor that's used, it needs to be tuned tight, just tight enough to conduct force through it, to conduct something through it. If it's too slack, nothing happens. If it's too tight, then it breaks. So basically, people that can get super flexible can go to the other end where their body is just like they're not tightly like fighting it. They're just kind of like mashed potatoes and like just completely to where, yeah, they're just hyper flaccid, hyper mobile, which is also not ideal, not what I'm talking about here. So getting back to the point, basically it's a way for our mind and our quality of our awareness to become kind of objective, quite tangible, quite solid, and have real solid, tangible effects in our physical body, especially over a period of time. Not subtle, not subjective, not based in imagination, and actually not based in intention. And the more the mind and kind of the wetsuit connection builds, the more tensions and holding patterns and conflict become extremely loud and noticeable in our body. And it can be really kind of freaky the way different things feel. And there is actually a bit of a science to it, meaning certain tissue layers have certain qualities that they feel like certain things happen in the body, have certain kind of repeatable results. Obviously, how we interpret that and how we think that is going to be quite subjective and could be subject to a lot of delusion. But that's why, you would usually have a teacher, or you would usually be at least developing discernment to be able to accurately see what's going on. And this is important because normally we have no real feedback for what our actual mind is doing, for our actual mental awareness or our actual mental quality, for the actual effect that it has. And not so much the effect, but the actual just quality of it. Like feeling really angry or irritated and then actually feeling exactly what that is in your body has a specific quality, as does being sad, as does each of the kind of 5 emotional things, which is more or less in line with what Chinese medicine mapped out in terms of like the organ systems and the tissues and the different qualities that they have. It's not that they just made it up. It's more so that these people were at such a high level of human experience, far beyond what I'm talking about here. But I'm just saying as a side point, it's more so that they really developed to the pinnacle of, human potential. Let's just leave it as vague and basic as that they were then able to look and say, oh, this is what's going on. This is what this is. They could see the cause and effect relationships and mapped everything out based on high level insight, not based on just some generic, mundane, morbid way of looking at the body, kind of like what we have now and what's unfortunately just left over. Even in Chinese medicine, can be quite mundane and quite monotonous and quite uninteresting a lot of times, but that's a different point. And in the same way, we normally don't have any real stress test for our mental quality, so we're able to succumb to a lot of ridiculous habits and a lot of ridiculous patterns. It's kind of like if you have a really low risk life, then you can really usually indulge in a lot of ridiculous things because there's no stress test for it. There's no point. And I guess as an example, one thing that I always tell people is like, if you really believe in what you think and you really believe in this, go out in the world and try to share it with people and see if anyone cares and see if you can even articulate it in a way that's meaningful or useful and has any validity or impact to others. And that's some degree of a stress test. Now that can obviously fall foul because then people just get sucked into like echo chambers and then they just get surrounded by people that validate whatever they say. And that's kind of another pretty big pitfall, but it's at least something of like putting something in the ring, like getting in the ring, actually stress testing your ideas and your philosophies. So, anyways, getting back to this is like the process of standing and the process of developing a deeper cohesion between our awareness and its ability to completely absorb and stabilize throughout our entire body, kind of like water in a sponge in a way, just kind of soaking in. The more that is able to happen, the more of like a verifiable awareness comes of exactly the effects, not necessarily what we think in that way, but actually what's behind all of that, what's behind what we think and feel. Not in even really like a profound or spiritual way in any way, shape, or form, just in a basic mental way. And then when you can kind of really feel that, that will, I mean, unless you're crazy or whatever, you're probably going to want to make some adjustments. Not without even necessarily like trying. It's just kind of like if I stomped on your toe and put like a 500-pound weight on your foot, you just are naturally going to probably want that off of your foot without any analysis or therapy or psychedelics or visualization or law of attraction or anything else. You're just naturally going to be like, this feels quite uncomfortable. Let me remove this cause as quickly as I can. So if you actually develop a tangible, real way of interfacing with your body, then you're like, oh my God, this feels absolutely awful. Usually you'll be like, okay, well, maybe I should make some adjustments. Hopefully. And then there's also many times where that occurs without you even doing anything because it's just this feedback loop that happens. The more kind of space and expansion and release that happens within the body that transfers up to the mind, and the mind can relax more, that transfers back to the body, and it creates that kind of feedback loop instead of the opposite, which is normal, which is just more contraction, more stress, more validity for all of our negative experiences and all of our more importance on all of our opinions and all of our points of view and all of our political belief systems and spiritual belief systems and philosophies. That just gets more and more important and more valid and more in conflict with all the things that we don't agree with. And we feel more superior because everyone's not in our group, but we feel more validated for the people that we are in that group. But the reality is, on the simplest level, that's typically having a pretty negative impact on our body and our health, which is not my idea. That's not anything profound or deep or meaningful. It's just the basic idea of pretty much every single authentic, legitimate, effective tradition that I've ever seen and come across. You read it in the book, in all the teachings, in all the books, everyone sees it, it's there, but how do you do it? How do you apply it? Or do you even care to? Which is another question. But the thing is, what happens is typically is people read, oh, I should be this way. I should release these mental things, but then they make the mental decision to do it, which is actually just more mental tension because you're saying, oh, I thought this way, but then I read this thing and that's what I should do because what I was doing before was bad. And now this thing is good or better. And if I do it, I'm going to get X, Y, and Z. And it's going to help me get rid of X, Y, and Z. And then I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that. All of that stuff is what's kind of subconsciously happening or maybe consciously happening. And that's actually just more tension, which is going to be the exact opposite of what we're trying to set out to do, which again goes back to what I was saying earlier. These ideas, these philosophies, these concepts are the vast majority of the time not something you do, not something you can do, not something you can possibly contrive or strive for, which is also in all the teachings. That's from the very beginning, they're saying that. But the point is that you have to go through a specific process, and then eventually you probably arrive at those things naturally anyways, because you've gone through similar causes and effects as to the people who wrote that stuff did. So it's natural that you might eventually arrive at the same thing if it is what you would consider to be truth. So, anyways, hopefully that makes sense. I got off on some different tangents that I didn't really necessarily mean or intend to. But I'm just trying to give different examples on how kind of the rubber hits the road for something as basic as standing and the certain mechanics. And just from the beginning of starting off, really feeling how your body is interacting with gravity and starting to actually tangibly feel all the ways you're mentally just resisting it and your awareness is fighting against the natural force that we all have to deal with 24/7, 365, at least while we're alive on this planet. So, anyways, I think this could have been more coherent and organized, but it's late, and hopefully it's been helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you soon.